Welcome to Issues of the Heart. Have you experienced anger, jealousy, anxiety, depression, marital storms or difficulties? Maybe struggling with self-control? Well, you're not alone, and we're here to help. We deal with these issues and more on Issues of the Heart. It's a weekly broadcast hosted by Jay Albright and a variety of guests, where we examine biblical remedies to those issues of the heart. Stay tuned for this week's episode. Welcome to Issues of the Heart, a weekly podcast designed to help you weather stormy activity. We believe, honestly, that most of the problems we battle and face in our life are issues that come from the heart. I'm not saying necessarily there's sin that's motivating some of those things, although in some cases it is. But what we want to talk about are those, we want to dig down deep into the heart and find where those issues come from. Now, we've been gone for a while. We just recently started the podcast back up. As a matter of fact, this is our first podcast since we've returned. And we've been out because I had a battle with cancer. Got great victory over that. The cancer's gone, and it's just taken some time with work and with dealing with the cancer and all for us to get back on, but we're back on now. And what we're going to do, first of all, I want you, if you would please, you have any questions, thoughts, once we've covered the subject, then please reach out to us. Go to info@recoveryministries.net. Give us your question, make your statement, and we'll address it. There'll be times we're actually going to do this live, and you can actually ask those questions while we're live. There's going to be other times when I'm going to have guests on, and we're going to handle some subjects. Matter of fact, I've got a couple of guys that are going to join that I'm extremely excited for you to hear what they have to say, a twist on some things that you've probably never, ever heard before. And so I'm looking forward to that. So we're going to cover all of these things, and we're going to cover the subject of restoration a little bit later. That's going to be one of our series, but this is series number 1, and this is going to be episode number 5. We've already had 4 episodes, and I'll briefly touch those so that you know what we've talked about in the previous podcast. If you want to go back and listen to those, you can certainly go back and listen to those previous podcasts. But in this thing of relationships and stormy activity in marriage, we're seeing almost epidemic proportions when it comes to marriage destruction. And so, it's really important, and families are being hurt and children are being hurt, and we want to do everything we can to help you. Now, I'm not going to be critical of anybody. We're just going to cover the subjects as they are. There may be some things that I'm going to say over time that you disagree with, and that's okay. Anybody can disagree that wants to disagree. We are going to make sure that we cover the things we think are extremely important, because we want to dig down to the heart, find where those things are coming from, and deal with the source. I'm convinced of this. In counseling, myself included, most of us spend a majority of our time mowing the lawn and not killing the roots. And we want to help take care of that and work with you in some of those subjects. So please hold on with us, and let's go into this series number 1, episode number 5, Anchors in Stormy Relationships. Now, if you're a living, breathing human being and you're in a relationship or in a marriage, I'm going to tell you, you either just came out of a storm, and so right now you're very sensitive to what I have to say, or you're about to go into a storm, or you're in a storm right now. And so I want to help you with that. And hopefully some of the things that we can give you will help you. And again, we have Recovery Ministries as a counseling ministry, and we deal with couples and individuals constantly, several every week. And we want you to please give us your questions and your thoughts. info@recoveryministries.net. I've dealt with a lot of people who were doing great things, great ministries. Things were happening in their life. They had great families. And then in a moment, it seems like in a moment, everything they had in regard to their relationship and marriage crumbled in their hand like dust. Now, some of the times that's not true. Some of the time we see it coming. And a lot of the people we deal with can say, and do say, we've seen that coming for years. We knew it was happening. We knew it was going to happen. We could see it coming, but it still caught us by surprise. But some people didn't see it coming. They seemingly woke up one day and it was there. And when those times come, look, when the water starts churning and the wind starts blowing and the storms are all over you. I heard an old guy say to me one time, he said, look, he said in the old days, they used to sound out to see how deep the water was when they were doing this shipping. When there weren't a voyage, they'd get in a storm. The wind would blow the ship. They didn't know which direction they were headed, so they would sound out to see how deep the water was, because they knew if they got on the rocks, they knew if they hit land, they'd be shipwrecked, and maybe they'd die. And so they would sound out. And when they sounded out, what they would do, they had an item they'd throw over, and they could tell the depth of the water by listening to the sound of the item. And as they would sound out and they realized the water was getting shallower, they would throw out anchors. Because they knew right then they couldn't go forward, they couldn't go backward, they couldn't go to the right, they couldn't go to the left, because any direction may result in a shipwreck. So they knew the best thing to do right then was be still. Be still. When Steph and I are dealing with couples, it seems like usually we're dealing with couples that have already been shipwrecked. But if we could get them before the wreck occurs to throw out an anchor and just stop, just be still. Don't make any decisions. Don't go forward. Don't go back. Just be still. Then I think we could help those couples, because then we could find out what happened and we could deal with it before they've wrecked. And so we started sharing with you almost a year ago some anchors that we recommend you throw out in stormy activity. One of the anchors that we recommended that you throw out, I'm going to go through these quickly because I want to get to episode 5's anchor. But one of the anchors that we talked about that you throw out is the anchor of thoughtful communication. The Bible said in Colossians chapter 4, verse number 6, let your speech be always with grace, seasoned with salt, that ye may know how ye ought to answer every man. So he said, let your conversation be always with grace, seasoned with salt. Now, conversation that's spoken with grace means that you speak to someone in a way, a positive way, that maybe they don't deserve. Maybe they deserve to be scolded. Maybe they deserve to be chewed out. Maybe they deserve to get a thrashing verbally. But when you speak with grace, you don't give them the thrashing verbally. And you don't give them the words of anger. You speak to them with grace. And then he says, seasoned with salt. Now, let me tell you about salt. Salt is a purifier. It's also a seasoning. Thanksgiving's coming up, and we're going to use a lot of it for seasoning, but salt is also a purifier. And what he's saying is, let your conversation be the type of conversation that is positive they may not deserve, but before you speak, clean it up with salt so that when you do speak, it's pure. I've counseled people, and when my wife and I were going to go on a trip, or go on vacation, or we're going to go speak somewhere over the weekend, there were some guys I'd say to them, look, we're going to be gone. We'll be back next week. While I'm gone, don't say anything. Don't say anything because you hadn't yet learned to clean it up with salt. I'm telling you that if we would think before we speak, we would avoid a multitude of marital problems. I had a guy tell me one time, he looked right, he said, I'll tell you what, I just say what I think. And I said, no, you say before you think. And that's the problem. Let your conversation always be with grace, seasoned with salt, cleaned up before you speak, so that you don't say the wrong thing. We've heard this all of our lives. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never harm me. I don't think there's anything that could be further from the truth than that. Broken bones can heal, but words spoken in anger and wrath usually last a lifetime. Clean up your conversation with salt so that you don't say the wrong thing. At work, sometimes, I deal with subjects that tend to be high stress type subjects. And it gets a little frustrating sometimes. And I want to respond to people in the field. And very often, there's some people that I really trust. And very often, before I send an email or before I call someone, I'll write out the email, and I have people that I trust read the email for me, and I explain to them, after you read it, be honest with me. If you see that email is going to cause harm, just tell me. I wouldn't send that if I were you. And there's been a lot of time, unfortunately, there's been a lot of times they've said to me, I wouldn't send that if I were you. And I didn't. So let your conversation always be with grace, seasoned with salt. Clean it up. Somebody said, well, we never go to bed with something unresolved. Well, that's okay. I believe in that if you're going to stay up all night to make sure you get it resolved. But if you say something just to be able to go to bed with it resolved, something maybe that you don't mean or something that's harsh, then maybe it's wiser to wait. So, that anchor of communication, when the problems come, when the wind blows, when the storm's coming, throw out the anchor of communication and then just be still. The Bible said in Proverbs 25:11, a word fitly spoken is like apples of gold and pictures of silver. Think before you speak. Think before you speak. There's the anchor of sincere communication. The Bible said to wives, that be in subjection to your own husband. Then he said that they may be without the word won by your conversation. So husbands, we're usually guilty of saying the wrong thing. I think as part of men, we're so prideful often, and we're so egotistical some of the time, that we say the wrong thing all the time. And then we spend half the night not able to sleep because we wish we could take back what we said that day before we went to bed. Ladies do something a little different than that. Women, rather than, and they do, sometimes they speak that way, but for a woman it's a little different because women, they think emotionally. And so the way they can handle these kind of situations is to be still, be quiet, just like we talked about when you throw the anchor out, and then do positive things so that the husband can be won by the conversation of the wives. Don't be critical. Don't be harsh. Have you ever been around a lady and you could sense the critical spirit, and so you expected her to say the wrong thing? Instead of doing that, throw out the anchor and just be still. Then there's respectful communication. Respectful communication. 1 Peter 3:1. Likewise, you wives, be in subjection to your own husband, that if any man or if any obey not in the word, they also may without the word be won by the conversations of the wives. You see, those who put up barriers can be won through respectful conversation. Let me say it like this. Have you ever tried to be angry with someone who just kept being sweet? Have you ever tried that? My soul, that's the most difficult thing in the world. So when you throw out that anchor of respect, and you become chaste and courteous and kind, nothing will have a positive impact on a man's wretched, filthy, stinking pride like a chaste conversation. Then there is the anchor of a controlled response. The anchor of a controlled response. What in the world am I talking about? Well, if you throw out the anchor of a controlled response in the middle of a storm, what that means is you've determined, I will not get upset about things that ultimately don't make a difference. Now, I don't know about you. Maybe you're much wiser than me. But I can say this, I bet a majority of the people who are listening to my voice right now and watching this podcast, if you're a man, a breathing man, I can tell you that most of us, and most ladies as well, we get upset the most about things that ultimately don't even matter. As a matter of fact, if we'll wait long enough, we won't even remember what it was we got upset about. I counseled a couple of years ago, and that boy, it was tough. And I finally said, all right, wait. I said, let's do this. Let's go back to when this all started. And I looked at him and I said, tell me how it started. He said, well, I'm sure she did something. And so I turned to her and I said, how did it start? She said, well, I don't remember. So all these years they've been in a battle and their marriage is on the rocks and they couldn't even remember why. had they thrown out that anchor of controlled response, they wouldn't have been there. I will not get upset about things that ultimately do not make a difference. John 21:21. Peter, seeing him, said to Jesus, Lord, what shall this man do? And Jesus said unto him, if I will that he tarry till I come, what is that to thee? Follow thou me. He said, you know what, Peter? It's none of your business. It's not that important to you. Peter, don't get upset about things that ultimately don't make a difference. And I'm telling you that if a couple is battling in their marriage or struggling in their marriage, if they'll throw out that anchor of controlled response, it'll salvage them from a lot of disasters. Don't major on minor offenses. Okay, so your wife didn't say something exactly the way you think she should have said. Maybe she didn't do something exactly the way you would have done it. I mean, do any of you guys, does your wife help you drive like my wife helps me drive? How does that affect you? Don't get upset about things that ultimately don't make a difference. Focus on your own needs for improvement. You know, when we're counseling couples, we'll usually bring the whole couple in and we'll counsel the couple together the first time. And then we divide them up. And when we divide them up, we'll counsel him, then we'll counsel her, then we'll counsel him, then we'll counsel her. And while we're counseling them individually, we don't usually let them talk about the other person. And when they do, what I try to say is, wait a minute, you know, I can deal with that with them. But right now we're dealing with you. What is it that you need to change? What is it that you can fix? And every once in a while, those of you who've counseled other people know what I'm saying. They'll say, well, you know, it really was him or it really was her. And boy, they did this and they did that and they did this and they did that. And then I ask them, so are you telling me that in all this time you didn't do anything? That you're absolvent of all guilt in this situation? In over 45 years, I've never seen that to be true. I will not get upset about things that ultimately don't make a difference. And if I'm going to focus on something wrong, I want to focus on what's wrong in my own life and allow God to fix what's right or what's wrong in my mate's life. And what we found out when we get him to look at him and we get her to look at her, and for them to fix themselves with God's help, usually we don't have to help the marriage. Usually it kind of takes care of itself. I will not get upset about things that ultimately don't make a difference. Throw out that anchor of a controlled response. I mean, we're talking about this right now, and probably tonight or tomorrow, somebody is going to say something they should not have said. Somebody's going to do something they should not have done. Focus on you. Do not make decisions in the heat of a disagreement. Never do that. Pride is a major interference to controlled responses. Guard yourself from pride. Proverbs 13:10, only by pride cometh contention, but the well-advised is wisdom. Only by pride cometh contention. If contention's there, because you hadn't thrown out an anchor of controlled response, you didn't throw out the anchor because of pride. Let me give you a little advice. Agree on some non-verbal or verbal identifiers or indicators. For instance, I might say to my wife, look, if you send me in a counseling session, if you see me starting to get a little bit anxious, or maybe I'm being a little too hard, or I'm saying something a little too stern, give me some kind of indication so I can back off. Even at work, I tell guys that I have a lot of confidence in at work. When we're in a big corporate meeting at our corporate office in Miami, I'll tell them, I say, look, if you see me headed in the wrong direction because of a firm stance I have, give me some kind of a sign. And they said, only if you do that for me too. And so we give each other signs all the time. Verbal indicators. Then there's the anchor of confidentiality. Now, this is our anchor for tonight. This is the one I wanted to focus on. We've only got, about 8 minutes left, but that's time for me to cover it. And if you have questions, please ask about it. But the anchor of confidentiality, I will keep private those things that do not need to be made known. Write that down, think about it, memorize that statement. I will keep private those things that do not need to be made known. One of the biggest battles, hardest battles that Steph and I fight when counseling is when you have a man or a woman who've shared the problems in their marriage with some of their friends, multiple friends, and the other one finds out about it. That makes the repairing of the relationship extremely difficult because confidence is broken. So you and your wife, you and your husband, so you're having problems, you're having difficulty. There are some people you should talk to. You should talk to your pastor. You should get counsel, wise counsel from him. You should listen to what he has to say. And if you need to go to a counselor like us, you should do that. But don't share those things with everybody else you know. I will keep private those things that do not need to be made known. Proverbs 25, verse number 9 says, debate thy cause with thy neighbor himself, and discover not a secret to another. If you got a problem with your neighbor, go talk to your neighbor. Don't go talk to everybody else you know. Go to your neighbor. So it's between your neighbor and you. Having trouble with your wife or your husband? You're in a battle. Go to them. And do not reveal private things to other people. Two things happen. First of all, your mate won't have any confidence in you anymore. You just destroyed that. But number two, those people that you went to, they'll no longer have confidence in your mate either. So you've destroyed their relationship with your other friends. Marriage matters should remain private unless legitimate counsel is needed. Then you go to your pastor. After you've gone to your pastor, if he recommends and you feel like you need to come to somebody like us, then we're here to help. Proverbs 11:13, a talebearer revealeth secrets, but he that is of a faithful spirit concealeth the matter. One thing I'd like to be able to do, when people have heard things and they have a concept or an idea of something that's going wrong with somebody else, I want to be able to say with pride and accuracy, well, they didn't hear from me. Keep those things private. To reveal a private thing destroys your mate's confidence. To reveal private things closes the lines of communication. If I know you're going to share with somebody else the things that we're battling, do you think I'm going to share anything else with you? Not a chance. When the storms come and the battles come and the marriage waters are getting rough and you're about to crash, there's about to be a major shipwreck. Throw out the anchor and just be still. Throw out the anchor of confidentiality and just be still. To reveal private things contributes to marital issues in the lives of those that you're sharing the information with. Think about it. When you share something your wife did or didn't do, or you share something your husband did or didn't do, do you realize that what you might be doing, you may be arousing an air of suspicion in them to their own mate? Well, if Jim's doing that, man, I thought Jim was a great guy. If Jim's doing that, I wonder if John could be doing it. If Sally's doing that, if she's doing everything he says she's doing, then I wonder maybe if Joan could be doing that. And all of a sudden, I watch people get uncomfortable with trust just by watching a movie. They'll watch a movie and they'll see where some husband was having an affair, and that's what the whole movie was about, and all these criminal things that have to happen after that, and sometimes murder and all that stuff that comes on these television shows. And I watched people actually start to question the loyalty of their own mate by just listening to something, even from television, that didn't need to be made known. To reveal private things lessens the potential for resolution. Look, usually when I'm talking to a couple, the first thing I'll say to them is, look, this is between us and you. This is not between other people in church and you. This is not between your neighbors and you. This is not between other family members and you. This is between us and you. And the reason we do that is because when you start revealing those private things, the potential for resolution in your marriage gets more difficult. Throw out that anchor of confidentiality and stop. I'm telling you that we've tried to help couples, and the biggest stumbling block we had in trying to help the couples was the parents on one side or the other, because they shared information they should have kept in confidence. And now a battle wages between their mate and their parents. And then their parents continue to urge them to stay away from the other mate. So remember, when the stormy activity comes, the water gets rough, and you fear that you're going to crash, throw out the anchor and just be still. Be sure and join us next week. We're going to resume with some other anchors that we need to throw out when we have stormy activity in our relationships and marriage. So please don't miss those. Remember, if you have a question, thought, or an idea, be sure, contact us at info@recoveryministries.net, and we'd love to hear from you. Thank you. We'll talk to you next week.